1 week after the resurrection, an unbelieving disciple named Thomas stands face to face with the risen Jesus. What he says next is one of the most theologically loaded sentences in the entire Bible. My Lord and my God. 5 words that could not be clearer. Today we're going to look at exactly what Thomas said, what he meant, what the Greek text actually tells us, and what the Watchtower Society's own publications say about it. Because this isn't just a question for scholars. It's a question Jehovah's Witnesses need to answer from their own Bible in their own words. Let's get into it. The context matters here. Thomas had missed Jesus' first appearance to the disciples after the resurrection. When they told him what they'd seen, he refused to believe it. He set a very specific condition. Unless I see in his hands the print of the nails, and stick my finger into the print of the nails, and stick my hand into his side, I will never believe it. 1 week later, Jesus appears again, and this time Thomas is there. There are no expletives from the disciples. If an expletive was going to be given, it would be at this moment when Jesus first arrives, but it doesn't happen. After giving a greeting, Jesus turns directly to Thomas and says, "Put your finger here and see my hands, and take your hand and stick it into my side, and stop doubting, but believe." And Thomas responds and says to Jesus, "My Lord and my God." Now here's the first thing to notice. Thomas doesn't say these words immediately when Jesus appears, which means it isn't a cry of surprise as some people contend. Not that a first century Jew would utter a modern expletive. He says them in response to something specific. Jesus knowing the exact private words Thomas had spoken when Jesus wasn't there. If Jesus knows what Thomas said in private, then Jesus isn't just a resurrected man. He knows the thoughts and words of human beings. He is omniscient. He is God. And Thomas draws exactly that conclusion. Some people claim Thomas wasn't calling Jesus my God at all. They say it was an emotional outburst, an exclamation of amazement addressed to the room or to God in heaven, not to Jesus personally. The Greek text closes that door completely. John writes, "ἀπεκρίθη Θωμᾶς και εἶπεν αὐτῷ." Thomas answered and said to him. That's to Jesus. The pronoun αὐτῷ, to him, is unmistakable. Thomas is directing his words to Jesus. The words, my Lord and my God, are addressed to the person standing in front of him. Scholar Lidija Novakovic confirms this. The introductory clause clearly indicates that Thomas addresses Jesus, i.e., that both designations have one referent. Both Lord and God refer to the same person, Jesus. Scholar Edward Klink agrees. The context indicates that Thomas's words are in the form and address, directed at Jesus personally. And here's the remarkable thing. The Watchtower Society's own publications agree. I want to show you something, because this isn't just a matter of what Trinitarian scholars think. It's what Jehovah's Witnesses' own leadership has said, repeatedly, in their own publications. Since he is the only begotten God who has interpreted his heavenly Father to us, we can appreciate the proper force of the words of the Apostle Thomas addressed to the resurrected Jesus, my Lord and my God. Thomas addressed Jesus, their words. Thomas was saying that Jesus was a God to him, a divine, powerful one. Thomas was calling Jesus his God, their words. Addressing the resurrected Jesus. Get that? Addressing the resurrected Jesus, the Apostle Thomas exclaimed, "My Lord and my God." He was addressing Jesus, their words. The Watchtower has said this over and over and over again across decades of publications. Thomas called Jesus his Lord and his God. They tried to explain it away, but the acknowledgement is right there in black and white. So here's a question worth sitting with. If Thomas was not calling Jesus my God, then Jehovah's Witnesses leadership have repeatedly provided false information in their publications. Are they wrong? Can they be trusted to provide accurate spiritual food? If a Jehovah's Witnesses says that Thomas was not calling Jesus his God, then they are tacitly claiming that their leadership repeatedly provided false information and cannot be trusted to provide accurate spiritual food. Let me make the grammar as simple as possible. This is Tom. If Tom says, "This is Sarah, she is my wife," who is Sarah to Tom? His wife. If Tom says, "This is Jimmy, he is my son," Who is Jimmy to Tom? His son. If Tom says, "Here's Scout. This is my dog," what is Scout to Tom? His dog. Simple enough? The word my is a possessive adjective. It identifies who someone is to the speaker. So when Thomas says, "My Lord and my God," who is Jesus to Thomas? His Lord and his God. That's it. That's the grammar. Now, Thomas was a first century monotheistic Jew. He didn't believe in many gods. He believed in one God, the God of Israel, the God of the Shema. So when Thomas calls Jesus his God, he isn't introducing a second God alongside the Father. He is identifying Jesus as the one God of Israel, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. As scholar Andreas Kostenberger says, there can be no question that the referent of Lord and God in this passage is Jesus. So either Thomas had two gods, which would make him a polytheist who violated the first commandment, or he believed Jesus and the Father were one person, which would make him a modalist, or he included Jesus within the identity of the one God. Those are the only three options. And Thomas was neither a polytheist nor a modalist. Let me add one more layer to those who want to go a little bit deeper into the Greek. Thomas's words, ho Kyrios mu ke ho theos mu, literally, the Lord of me and the God of me, are in the nominative case forms. But in Greek, the nominative is frequently used as a vocative, a direct address. As Edward Klink says, while the titles could be functioning as true nominatives and thus be translated more as a statement of recognition, "It is my Lord and my God," the context also suggests that the titles are in the form of an address, with the nominatives functioning as vocatives. And here's what makes this irrefutable for Jehovah's Witnesses. The Watchtower Society's own Kingdom Interlinear uses John 20:28 as an example of exactly this grammatical construction. They write, when in addressing a person or thing, the nominative case is used instead of the vocative, then the nominative case of the definite article may be used along with it, as, for example, in John 20:28. The Watchtower's own publication confirms that John 20:28 is an address, a direct address to Jesus, calling him my Lord and my God. There's one more piece of the puzzle worth seeing. Thomas's words echo the words of David in Psalm 34:23 in the Greek Old Testament, the Septuagint. David cries out to Jehovah, "Ho theos mu ke ho Kyrios mu," my God and my Lord. David was not speaking to two separate beings. He was addressing Jehovah with a double title for emphasis. Thomas does the same thing, but in reverse order, my Lord and my God, addressing Jesus with the same double title formula David used for Jehovah. John knows exactly what he's doing here. At the very beginning of his gospel, he wrote, "The Word was God." Now, at the very end, in the climax of the resurrection narrative, a disciple looks at Jesus and says, "My Lord and my God." The gospel opens and closes with the same confession. This is a deliberate literary structure, which scholars call an inclusio, designed to show the reader that the Jesus who walked through those chapters is the one of whom John said in the beginning, he is God. Now there's one more thing. After Thomas says, "My Lord and my God," Jesus doesn't correct him. He doesn't say, "Thomas, be careful. You're calling a creature God." He doesn't say, No, I'm only God's representative, not God himself." He doesn't say anything remotely like that. Instead, Jesus says, "Because you have seen me, have you believed? Happy are those who have not seen and yet believe." Jesus responds to Thomas's confession by blessing those who will make the same confession without having seen what Thomas saw. He does not correct the confession. He endorses it. Jesus accepts the title Thomas gives him. He accepts being called my Lord and my God, because that's who he is. John's Gospel begins with the declaration that Jesus is God. The Word was God. And John's Gospel ends with a disciple confessing Jesus to be his God, my Lord and my God. The same confession from the author and from a disciple form a literary structure called an inclusio, and the entire Gospel points to this moment as its intended climax and conclusion. Thomas was a monotheistic Jew who would never have spontaneously shouted, "My God," or have called a creature his God. Jesus was standing right there and didn't correct him. The Greek text says that he was addressing Jesus directly. The Watchtower's own publication confirms it. The grammar of the possessive pronoun confirms it too. And the Old Testament background, David using the same double title for Jehovah, confirms it as well. When Thomas said, "My Lord and my God," he was doing exactly what John designed the entire gospel to lead every reader to do. Recognize that Jesus standing before him is the God of Israel, the second person of the triune God, personally distinct from the Father, but fully and truly God. If you found this helpful, please share it, especially with someone who is studying with Jehovah's Witnesses. And subscribe if you want to keep going through the biblical evidence for who Jesus is, one passage at a time.